Martin Clarke stepped into Urbanite Coffee, the flagship location of New York's trendiest coffee chain. The morning rush created a symphony of clicking keyboards and hushed conversations among fashion-forward patrons. Despite the crowds, Martin's calm demeanor remained undisturbed, his charcoal peacoat and understated watch betraying nothing of his net worth. He approached the counter with a gentle smile. "Good morning. Could I please get a medium dark roast with room for cream?" The barista, Alex, barely looked up from the espresso machine. "Medium? You mean a grande, right?" The sarcasm dripped heavier than the coffee being brewed. "Oh, I'm sorry," Martin replied, his soft Canadian accent becoming more apparent. "A grand dark roast, please." Alex's eyebrow arched dramatically as they exchanged glances with a coworker. "Wow, did you guys hear that? We've got ourselves a real live Canadian." Alex's voice shifted to a mocking tone. "A grande, please." Several customers glanced up, some uncomfortably shifting in their seats, others snickering along. Martin's expression remained pleasant, though his eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "That'll be $5.75, Alex continued, holding out a hand expectantly. "We don't accept Canadian Monopoly money, though, eh?" Martin handed over his black card without comment. Alex swiped it carelessly, then pushed it back across the counter. "Name for the order?" "Martin, please." Alex scribbled something on the cup and announced loudly, "One dark roast for Martin from Canada." The coworker stifled a laugh, turning away to prepare the order. Martin collected his card, sliding it back into his wallet beside an ID badge he was careful to keep concealed. Alex leaned forward, smirk widening. "You Canadians really are too nice. Must be all that free health care, huh?" Martin maintained his composure, gently tapping his fingers against the counter. "The health care is quite good, yes." Alex rolled their eyes dramatically while sliding the cup to a fellow barista. "God, they're so boring, too. No comeback, nothing." The comment was just loud enough for Martin to hear. The second barista, Jamie, glanced nervously between Alex and Martin. "Order for Martin," they called out, placing the cup on the counter with noticeably more care. Martin nodded appreciatively, but as he reached for his coffee, Alex slid it slightly farther away. "Careful there. Wouldn't want you to spill and say, 'Sorry to the floor' 50 times. Several customers were now openly watching the interaction. A young woman in business attire frowned disapprovingly at Alex before returning to her laptop. "Just having some fun with our international guest," Alex announced to the watching crowd, clearly enjoying the audience. "Hey, Martin from Canada. Do you ride a moose to work? Or was it too snowy today?" Martin took a careful sip of his coffee, wincing slightly at the taste. It was burnt. Deliberately so, he suspected. He considered saying something, but decided against it. "Not much, too. Say, huh?" Alex continued, leaning over the counter. "Man, you'd think Canadians would have more personality with all that wilderness. Or do you save all your conversations for the bears?" Jamie fidgeted with a stack of cups. "Alex, maybe what?" Alex cut them off. "It's just jokes. I'm creating a memorable customer experience." They turned back to Martin. "That's what Americans do. We're entertaining, unlike our neighbors up north." Martin set his cup down carefully. "I'm just trying to enjoy my morning coffee." Alex crossed, their arms, eyebrows raised in mock offense. "Relax, man. It's just a joke. Can't take a little heat?" Martin took another sip of the burnt coffee and grimaced. "Actually, I think there might be something wrong with this brew. It tastes burnt." His voice remained steady, polite. Alex snorted. "Oh, suddenly the Canadian's a coffee expert. Let me guess, you drink maple syrup lattes back home?" The café had grown quieter now, with more customers paying attention to the unfolding scene. A middle-aged woman at a nearby table whispered something to her companion, both looking disapprovingly at Alex. "I'd just like a fresh cup, please." Martin said, sliding the burnt coffee back across the counter. "If it's not too much trouble." "If it's not too much trouble," Alex mimicked in an exaggerated accent, taking the cup. "Fine. One special Canadian snowflake coffee coming right." Up, Jamie stepped forward. "I'll make it." "No, I got it," Alex insisted, grabbing a new cup and deliberately marking it Canadia in large letters. "Wouldn't want to disappoint our international guest." The manager, Denise, emerged from the back office, sensing the tension. She surveyed the scene with growing concern but hesitated to intervene immediately. Alex returned with a new cup, sliding it across dramatically. "One dark roast for Canadia. Extra non-burnt, just for you." Martin took the cup carefully and sipped. This time, instead of coffee, it was filled with hot water and a splash of coffee for color. Several customers gasped audibly. "Is something wrong?" Alex asked with feigned innocence. "Oh, wait, let me guess. Not Canadian enough?" Denise finally approached. "Is everything okay over here?" Before Martin could respond, Alex laughed. "Everything's fine. Our friend from the Great White North is just very particular about his coffee." One of the newer employees, Ryan, tugged at Jamie's sleeve, whispering urgently. Maybe you shouldn't mess with him." Alex overheard and laughed loudly. "Why? What's he gonna do?" Martin set the cup of colored water down with deliberate care. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek phone, its screen illuminating his features as he unlocked it. The café had grown remarkably quiet, the morning bustle suspended in the tension of the moment. Something wrong with that one. "Two?" Alex taunted, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed their face. Denise stepped closer. "Sir, I apologize if there's an issue with your order. I'd be happy to make you a fresh cup myself." Martin smiled at her, the warmth not quite reaching his eyes. "That's very kind of you, but I'm afraid we're past that point now." His fingers tapped methodically on his phone screen, scrolling through contacts. Alex leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Oh no, guys, he's probably writing a strongly worded email to corporate." The mockery continued, but the delivery had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Maybe he'll CC the Canadian Mounties." A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One man in a business suit closed his laptop, sensing this was no longer just casual workplace rudeness. Ryan whispered something to Jamie, who suddenly straightened up, eyes widening in recognition as they stared more intently at Martin. "I'm sorry about this," Denise said, shooting a warning glance at Alex. "Whatever we can do to make it right—" "Oh, there's definitely something we can do," Martin replied, his Canadian accent somehow more pronounced now. He held up his phone, showing a contact screen. The name Gregory Pearson was highlighted. Urbanite Coffee's district manager. Alex's smirk faltered slightly. "Oh no, are you going to leave us a bad Yelp review? Or maybe call our manager's manager?" I'm literally shaking. Several customers had taken out their phones, sensing something significant was about to happen. Jamie took a small step away from Alex, distancing themselves from what was coming. Martin smiled pleasantly, hitting the call button. The phone began to ring on speaker, echoing in the now silent cafe. "No," Martin said calmly, meeting Alex's increasingly uncertain gaze. "I'm calling the district manager." Alex rolled their eyes dramatically, but the gesture seemed forced now. "Sure you are, because district managers just hand out their personal numbers to random customers." The phone continued to ring on speaker. Denise's face had drained of color. As she stared at the screen, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Mr. Clarke," Gregory Pearson's voice answered, professional and crisp. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" The cafe fell completely silent. Even the espresso machine's hiss seemed muted. "Hello, Greg," Martin replied, his voice taking on a subtle note of authority that hadn't been present before. "I'm actually at your Midtown flagship location, having an interesting customer experience." Alex's cocky posture crumbled visibly. They mouthed something to Denise, who shook her head sharply. "Martin, sir, I can explain," Denise began, her professional demeanor fracturing. Martin held up a hand, silencing her instantly. The gesture was small, but carried unmistakable weight. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Greg's voice crackled through the speaker. "Please don't leave." "I wouldn't dream of it," Martin replied, ending the call. He pocketed his phone and leaned casually against the counter as if settling in for a show. Alex swallowed hard, confidence evaporating. "Look, it was just some harmless fun. Everyone jokes around here. It's part of the New York experience." Several customers had begun whispering among themselves. One woman was typing frantically on her phone, likely sharing the unfolding drama. On social media. "Martin, Clarke?" Jamie whispered, the name finally registering. As in, Martin Clarke Industries. Ryan's eyes widened. "The Martin Clarke? The one who bought out?" "That's enough," Denise cut in sharply, then turned to Martin with a painfully forced smile. "Mr. Clarke, perhaps we could discuss this in my office." Martin shook his head. "I'm quite comfortable here." He glanced pointedly at Alex. "Besides, I believe we were in the middle of a cultural exchange about Canadians." The front door swung open as Greg Pearson rushed in, slightly out of breath. His eyes scanned the café frantically before landing on Martin. Recognition and alarm flashed across his features. "Wait," Alex stammered, looking between Greg and Martin. "Sir, you're not seriously calling about this, are you?" Martin raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm serious." Greg hurried over, extending his hand. "Mr. Clarke, this is an unexpected pleasure. When you said you might drop by our New York locations, I had no idea you meant personally." Alex's face contorted in confusion. "Wait, who is this guy?" Greg shot Alex a withering look before turning back to Martin. "I apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced today." Martin waved a dismissive hand. "No need for apologies, Greg. I find it educational to experience our establishments as a regular customer." He turned to face the now silent café. "It provides insights." A woman at a nearby table gasped, suddenly connecting the dots. "Oh my God," she whispered to her companion. "That's Martin Clarke. He acquired Urbanite Coffee last quarter." The murmur spread through the café like wildfire. Several phones were now recording the scene. "Acquired?" Alex repeated weakly, the color draining from their face. Martin smiled pleasantly. "Perhaps I should introduce myself properly." He stood taller now, his unassuming demeanor giving way to the natural authority of someone accustomed to running multinational corporations. "Martin Clarke, majority shareholder and CEO of Clarke Holdings. I purchased this coffee chain 3 months ago." A collective gasp rippled through the café. Jamie looked like they might faint. Ryan was frozen in place, mouth slightly open. "That's not possible," Alex stammered. "We would have known." The acquisition was kept quiet while we evaluated. "Operations," Greg explained tersely. "Only upper management was informed." "I make a point of visiting all my new investments personally," Martin continued, his voice pleasant but firm. "Usually anonymously at first. It gives me a genuine sense of the customer experience." Denise looked physically ill. "Mr. Clarke, I cannot express how deeply sorry—" "I'm actually glad this happened," Martin interrupted, turning his attention back to Alex. It revealed a significant issue that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Alex swallowed hard, trying to salvage the unsalvageable. "Sir, I was just being friendly. It was all a joke." "Was it?" Martin asked, his voice cooling significantly. "Tell me, is this how Urbanite Coffee welcomes international customers? Is mockery part of your training program?" Several customers were openly recording now, the confrontation too delicious to miss. Martin leaned forward. "Now, what was that you were saying about Canadians?" Alex's mouth opened and closed repeatedly, words failing. Their hands trembled slightly against the counter. I didn't mean... It was just banter. Banter, Martin repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice. Where I come from, we call it disrespect. The silence in the café was absolute. Even the usual ambient music had stopped, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Please, Mr. Clarke, Alex's voice cracked. I need this job. I have student loans, and rent in this city is impossible. Perhaps you should have considered that before deciding which customers deserved your respect, Martin replied, not unkindly but firmly. Greg stepped forward, managerial damage control, instincts kicking in. Alex, I think you should clock out for the day. We'll discuss this later. Later? Martin raised an eyebrow. I don't think so, Greg. A customer near the window was live-streaming the entire encounter, her commentary barely a whisper. And now the CEO is confronting the barista who was mocking him. Denise wrung her hands. Mr. Clarke, I take full responsibility for my staff's behavior. This reflects a failure of leadership on my part. Martin considered this. You're partially right, Denise. This is indeed a leadership failure, but not yours alone. He turned to Greg. Our company values dictate that everyone is treated with dignity, regardless of where they're from. Wouldn't you agree, Greg? Greg nodded vigorously. Absolutely, sir. Then why, Martin continued, his voice deceptively soft, do we have employees who think this kind of behavior is acceptable? Jamie and Ryan stood perfectly still as if trying to become invisible. Other employees had emerged from the back, drawn by the commotion, now watching in horror. I've been monitoring Yelp reviews for this location, Martin said. There's a pattern of complaints about one particularly rude barista. He didn't need to look at Alex for everyone to know who. He meant Alex was near tears now. Sir, please, Martin turned to Denise. As manager, what would you recommend in this situation? Denise straightened, recognizing the test for what it was. Immediate termination. We have a zero-tolerance policy for customer harassment. Martin nodded. I couldn't agree more. He sighed deeply. I think we need to make some staffing changes. Greg cleared his throat. Alex, you're terminated, effective immediately. Please collect your belongings and leave. The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Alex stood frozen, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. But they began, then stopped, recognizing the futility. With trembling hands, Alex untied their apron and placed it on the counter. I'm sorry, they whispered, the words coming too late. Martin nodded acknowledgement but offered nothing more. The time for apologies had passed. As Alex disappeared into the back room to collect their things, the café remained eerily silent. The customers watched, riveted by the real-world drama unfolding before them. Jamie stepped forward cautiously. Mr. Clarke, can I get you a proper coffee? On the house, of course. That would be lovely, Martin replied, his demeanor softening slightly. Just a dark roast, no need for anything fancy. While Jamie prepared the coffee with meticulous care, Greg and Denise conferred quietly in the corner, occasionally glancing nervously in Martin's direction. Alex emerged from the back, eyes red, a small bag clutched tightly. They avoided eye contact with everyone as they headed for the door. A few customers watched with unmistakable satisfaction as the once arrogant barista made their humiliating exit. Jamie personally delivered Martin's coffee in the company's finest ceramic mug rather than a paper cup. I added a splash of Canadian maple syrup, they said with a cautious smile. A genuine tribute, not mockery. Martin's eyes crinkled appreciatively as he took a sip. Perfect, thank you. He found a quiet corner table and settled in, opening his laptop to begin his workday. The café gradually returned to its normal rhythm, though customers continued to steal glances at him, whispering about what they'd witnessed. Greg approached hesitantly. Mr. Clarke, about our quarterly review meeting. We'll discuss it tomorrow, Martin replied, not looking up from his screen. I think we've had enough excitement for one morning. As Greg retreated, Martin took another sip of his coffee, savoring the subtle maple notes. A faint smile played at the corners of his mouth. Funny, he murmured to himself, typing an email to his assistant. I just came in for a coffee. Turns out I had to clean up some garbage first.